Just
All right, we're back with our 10 tips to help win football games. We made it all the way to number 4, guys. Number 4 of our 10 tips should be exciting. Are you ready for the big unveil, Chad? Number
I've been
4.
waiting all day for this. I can't
This
wait.
is going to be big. Play faster.
Big tip.
Play faster. You know how they used to tell you when you were an O lineman, run faster?
Huh? It
This
didn't
is
help
play
either.
faster. You know,
I didn't run any
the team that
faster.
plays the fastest is going to win. And, you know, that sounds pretty simple, kind of like our stop third downs. But in this one, that was just a tease. There's actually a point here. The team that plays faster is best. Now, I put faster in quotation marks. So now here on the podcast, we're doing the air quotes, faster. But the reality is faster in this case does not mean you're playing with a tempo fast. I don't care what tempo people play with. So this is not to advocate that you need to play in a hurry up tempo. If you do, that's great, but that's not what I'm talking about. Faster in this case, Chad, means faster thinking. The team that's players can process their assignment and their techniques the quickest will win most of the time. This is one of the tips. So of course, that's the tip. Then we get to how can one do that? So how can players on your team process their assignment and techniques faster? The team that plays the fastest wins. I really thought it really, maybe I'm overstating something that's pretty simple and everybody understands. And if they are, I guess they can just tune this one out. But it feels like when I watch other people that these teams have a lot of things in their offense or their defense or their special teams that bog kids' minds down. And if you want to really be good at football and you're listening to this because you want these 10 different things we're going to throw out there, some of them will be more useful to people than others. I'll acknowledge that. But if you're not playing fast, in the air quotes, you're wrong. If you're not letting kids just get after it, you're wrong. If I say, Chad, what's your mother's name? You answer just like that. You know your mother's name. If you ask a kid, hey, what's your mother's name? They answer just like that. If you ask them, what do you do on this play? And they say, well, I mean, ain't that the one where you're already out. If the other team says, what do you do on this play? And they say, I blocked down. Just like you would say your mom's name. You know, well, what are you going to do if he does this? I'm going to do that. Now, how you get to that is different because there's more than one way to skin a cat. And there's a lot of different ways that one could help their team play faster. And we're about to get to that. But I want to make sure that's clear before we even get into how someone can play faster. What this tip really is about is how can your kids that process information quicker are going to have a better chance of winning. And Chad's a principal right now. Michael's an assistant principal. It's very important to them about instruction. We joke on the podcast a lot. It's a lot of sports talk and joking. But the reality is both of your jobs are primarily about instruction. Every kid on the team is not going to be a genius, just like every kid in that school. So I'm not talking about those people who can coach up the AP kids or who can coach up the kids who really, really want to be out there. I'm saying, how fast can you make your players process information regardless of their intellectual capabilities? The people some people naturally can do this, Chad. Some people can't. The ones who naturally can do it, it's easy. Anybody can coach them. But who can get these other guys to play fast? You want to know how to win football games? Focus on that. Not the magic offense or defense, not the magic way to do March and April workouts or some junk like that. Try to think of ways to build confidence in your kids. Try to think of ways for them to play faster. And this is it. I can remember, I'll tell this story, Michael will remember it, and I'll move on to how. But I can remember we were at Chapel Hill, we're in, I think, our second year there. We had a kid who was a running back, put him in outside linebacker, never played outside linebacker. This is in the day when you saw a lot of wing T-ish teams, okay? So we didn't see a ton of spread stuff. But the boy we had a pretty simple read system back then. So he's reading maybe the tailback or the lone back. You know, he steps out like toss. You attack his outside hip. Just go get it, baby. He's downhill, you're squeezing. He's away from you. You know, you're playing the backside routes, right? Everybody did that back then. Michael actually was coaching outside backers. We were in, I believe it literally was the first play of the first game of the regular season. They run toss. We had drilled this kid, you know, over and over. He steps out for toss, go. You got to beat the block. The boy just did it. For what, I mean, it was like an 8-yard loss. Man caused the fumble. I can't remember, but he just annihilated this poor boy with the football. And this kid was not really good at defense otherwise, to be honest. Been a really good running back. And making that one play really fast changed the whole trajectory of his ability to help our defense for the next 10 minutes. You know, giving him a simple thing he could do. Now, did I confuse the hell out of a lot of people afterwards? Yes. I'm not saying it always worked out like this. I'm just giving you an example. That allowing that young man to play fast by giving him, this guy can only do 3 things, man. And we're just work those 3 things over and over. And the first time he saw one, maybe even he got lucky, but he blew it up. Tackle for loss. Everybody's going crazy on the sideline. We got us a defensive player that really wasn't sure about it otherwise. Am I exaggerating this, Michael?
No, I remember the play you're talking about. Mario playing. Yes, it was exactly what you said. Like we drilled this all week. We were, you know, it was one of their biggest plays. We were very prepared for that. And then when the opportunity arose, he took advantage of it, you know. And I think that was a big thing. I think that was, you know, from like a defensive standpoint, I remember, you know, as you know, 2009, 10 era, we were kind of transitioning away from more of like a 4-4 defense into like a 3-4. We were seeing so much more spread stuff. And it was, I felt like we made it too elaborate, and we struggled in the early stages because we were trying to call a front and a movement and a stunt and a coverage and all this stuff. And it was just so much for kids to go. And it was so much more opportunity for them to miss something. They got part of it, but not all of it. And then so everybody wasn't on the same page. And so we had to kind of learn to just take all of that information and put it into as few words as possible, as few syllables as possible, that they understood. Like, it's just, bam, this word means I know what I'm doing. When I hear this, I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think, don't mistake anybody listening to this thinking we had all the answers. I was just giving a for example story. We messed a lot of stuff up too along the way. But I gave that particular, I mean, I could tell a million stories of we asked the kid to do his assignment, he did it, and he felt better. But what I mean is that story stood out to me to tell here because of the fast. The boy played fast. He understood his assignment. If he only understood one thing, he at least understood that one thing. When he did his job, it worked. It's almost like he looked over at Michael like, oh, damn, this kind of works.
Yeah.
Like I did what they asked me to do, and it worked. So guess what happened? He started doing some of the other things he wasn't as good at better too. And so I don't want it to turn into let's talk about offense all day this evening either. I don't want it to turn into I'm just advocating for people going no huddle sprint tempo or something. Not necessarily. I just mean in general, we got to find ways to play faster. So let's talk about how you can play faster, Chad Flatt. 1, more is not necessarily better. Much like your mantra, Chad, more is not necessarily better. So you kind of trimmed down recently, you know, more is not necessarily better. What do I mean by that? Well, let me give a little disclaimer, and I'm going to turn this one over to you, Chad. All of these, there's exceptions to the rule, guys. If you want to be extremely long in your play call, if you want to have every play under the sun, good for you. I'm not really saying that's not something someone can do. But it is not the way to make your kids play the fastest. Maybe you don't feel like that's as important of a tip as I do, and that's okay. We did the clinic on practice, and we had Adam Gaylor, who's the defense coordinator at Jinx in Oklahoma. I think he's one of the best coaches in the country. I did before, and I still do. But he kind of took the stance of he didn't like all this, make it easy on them, make it easy on them. Like, we're going to do it all. And you know what I say for Coach Gaylor? He should do that. Jinx has been winning a little more than the Dragons won when I coached them. So I don't have any room to tell him how they ought to do it. And he may feel like at Jinx, which is like Buford in Georgia, that they need all that stuff. He knows Jinx better than I do. So these are pretty vague. These are pretty geared to what we saw. If you want to pick, there's really 5 things we're going to talk about tonight. If 3 of them are helpful and 2 of them are awful for you, good for you. Don't take it as a whole part lesson that every bit of this you have to adopt as it's perfect, because you're going to be disappointed. But these are the things I thought of when I said, what are some ways we can show people how they can play their games a little faster, get their kids faster to play their technique in their assignment. So, Chad, what comes to mind when we say more is not necessarily better?
Okay, so I think I'm probably going to bleed into the second point some with this, but I think that's just the way it has to go for me and what I did for our team. I do want to say that the story about Mario, I did not coach that young man when y'all were coaching at Chapel Hill, but I know what you're talking about. But I can also say, and everybody loves when you get some personal story time on this, but I can remember myself in high school. I remember the moment when I did something I'd been coached to do, just like y'all described Mario, and it was like the complete light bulb happened. I could do so many more things thereafter because what they had told me to do, it was like, holy hell, that worked correctly. And it was just about blocking down, and the guy crossed my face. He moved from where he initially aligned and crossed my face from there, and I just took him and ran with it. And like that for me is like one of those moments that I was like, oh, well, this makes sense now. And because I just followed what I'd been told, everything started to get a lot easier all of a sudden. So I can, relate to that same story. But what I would say, what I'd written down, what I thought about with this was that I can remember the many different ways we used to call the same buck sweep play different ways. I can remember it being called 121, 929, back in the real Delaware stuff, red 28 in a different offense, same play, until it eventually bled down to where we did things where it was one word was all it was. And that first letter, that was really the only teaching we did. And I don't even know if the kids knew that the B meant buck and bear. I just think they knew bear meant we pull and do this, and we go to the right because there's an R in it. Is all.
Well, I would make an argument that kids memorize stuff anyway. We can get to that in a minute, but I don't. Yeah, I would say they memorize it. I don't think they understand anything. So I think teaching them the numbers. I used to think differently, but I think they just memorized it. So when you used to call it trade right 482 down, they just memorized what trade right 482 down meant. They didn't understand a damn thing about right, 4, 8, or 2, or down. So that once I figured that out, I got a little better at play calling. Yes.
Well, and I remember, I go back to that, is I remember because I wanted to be a coach and I want to do this. I was very interested in what all those other words and letters and numbers meant. 95% of the team did not care anything about any of that stuff.
And you would have learned it anyway. So I'm not, we weren't coaching to you. And that's what I guess I'm trying to get across here now, which is, yes, there are some kids on the team who will learn whatever you ask them to learn.
Correct.
But you really need your entire team to play fast, because last I checked, one guy can totally screw up the play.
Correct.
So yeah,
you've got to by having all this other stuff, your weakest link mentally on the team is more likely to get confused and let you down, which lets everybody down then. So any way possible, you can reduce the amount of things asked to be done. And that's why even I go back to, I evaluated all of our base plays for what skills we had to know. and I only practiced those skills. That was it. I didn't practice 100 difference because I only know this is the only thing we do on this play. That's what
years
everybody has to do.
before, years before many people ran power read, we were running power read. Now it's probably not as great of a play because defense see it a lot more and understand how to play it. One of the reasons we went to that power read scheme was we were already running the blocking scheme. We weren't running outside zone. So to run some kind of jet play and give the ball was a whole new thing you had to teach. But if we just didn't block the end and block power, which we were already running, and then the receivers block stalk for the jet, and you just let the quarterback read it. The first time I watched that, I'm like, this is genius. Now it's not genius anymore. It's pretty commonplace. But when I first saw it, I'm like, wow, because and it wasn't even that I thought it was a neat play. It was that we didn't have to teach anything. You could literally do the exact same thing we were doing for something else. So that's what I mean when more is not better. Okay, so what I think, and you're right on the verbiage too, which we're going to expand on even further in a moment. But what I really want, and Michael can bring this in from a defense point of view as well, but more is not better in terms of if you have more things and they're just to have them. I mean, is it really better? So if we have to run, if all of our outside stuff is a pin and pull scheme, everything's a pin and pull scheme, everything. But we think, to beat this one team, we also need outside zone. And we think to beat this other team, we really need a mid zone, and we don't need to treat it like outside zone. We really need to, move this guy's rule different here, and then the center can pull and this guy can block down. And you know what I mean? And now, that's a whole new play. So nothing wrong with a whole new play, but you don't know if you really even need it. And there's a way you can get that same play and block something you're doing now. Like counter is a great scheme that you can pretty much run anything at, So you got to figure out when it is okay to add more and when it's not. And so take it to a special team level. How many damn punt returns can one team actually have when most of the time they're terrified to catch the damn thing and they yell Peter the minute they kick it, or they're all scared to jump off sides. They all stand there, or they all go rough the punter, or none of them are scared to rough the punter. And then we're still coming up with 9 different punt returns. I don't understand. More is not necessarily better. Just be hella good at one punt return. Just get a punt return. So what if they know you're doing it? Most of the time, they punt the damn thing out of bounds anyway or something. So more is not better. Sometimes you need another pickup, but not always. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, there's just only so much practice time. Practice, every time you add something in, it's one more thing that you've got to get practice time. So you're spreading yourself thinner because you don't have time to necessarily work on the basics of the things that you've got to have because you added this new stuff. So now we got to spend time working on it. Practice is depending on what you are, you may only get an hour of offense or defense. Every time you add something to that, you're just adding one more thing that you got to work on, or you're not going to be any good at it. So you're either spreading yourself too thin that you can't work on anything, so you're not really good at anything.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. If and I guess let me reiterate this for anybody that didn't get it the first time. If Chad had a tackle that had 6 things to do, all the boy had to do was block down, reach, pass pro, some variation of maybe pulling on some play, and that was it. Then he could spend the whole practice only working those 4 things.
And that's what we did.
If we added a 5th thing, now it was 20. If they wanted to work them all, it was 20%. I'm not trying to insult people's intelligence. I know they understand this, but yet people still do it.
Right. No, and then within that, like you talk about more, if we knew we were only likely to run a very low percentage of that play, it only got worked, as Michael said, in practice once a week, maybe, because it was not. But if we thought we were going to have to use a lot of that couple plays, then we worked it more that week. Because
but it just becomes a thing where you have to analyze. This may be the whole tip of the tip. But you have to analyze the risk and reward. the cost benefit analysis or whatever you want to say. And there's no magical number for it, but you got to figure out something. Like, at what? So would it be better? Let me jump a thing and add a scenario. So we would do certain things on the right hash that we would only do on the right hash, and certain things on the left hash we would only do on the left hash. And nobody ever figured that out, because who would? I mean, this wasn't our base play. Base plays we ran both ways, of course, and all that. But if we're running this play and we're only going to call it, max one time a game, probably not even, and it's always going to be on the left hash, and it's always going to be something we do in a medium yardage or something. Say we run 10 all year. At what point is it worth being really good at those 10? I mean, we're going to be hellacious good at these 10 times we run this play out of the, 500-600 plays you run in a year. 10 of them, we're going to run this play. So we're going to run it on this hash, exactly like we practice. We're ready for all the fronts. They can we're ready to roll. And we spent so much time on that. Now, would it have been better to have 2 of those? Yes, it would have been better. Would it have been more better, if such a word, than what it would have cost us to have to practice them both? Does that make sense? Am I saying this right, Chad? Anybody listening? Because I hope I'm not confusing people. What I mean is, if it would be 10% better to have both plays, it's 20% better to have one play and be better at it. Correct. They're both better. So for you to be listening right now and say, well, hell, of course it'd be better. Yeah, I know it would be better, but it might cost you something. It might cost you something that's not worth it. It would be like buying a Coca-Cola in the vending machine for $25. Like, of course you need a Coke, and of course you need to buy it, but should you pay $25 for this Coke? Probably not. And people are paying $25 for these punt returns they're running. You know what I mean? Like, they're doing all this stuff that's jacking up their regular punt return because they feel like they got to have it for the one time when they do this and the one time. Yeah, sometimes it sucked, Chad, when we only had that one play on the left hash in that one situation. Sometimes I would have liked to have had another one. But more times than not, and what I felt like was a greater benefit, we were pretty damn good at that play. And so it benefited us a lot. And every now and then it bit us. And to me, that was worth it. Our kids could play faster. So go ahead.
You always nailed that on one. And more, I don't even call it a play, Chris, but more of a scheme, is like having the quarterback roll out to their non-throwing hand. It's a waste of time. Like, it's just so much work to get it done. Mm-hmm. And I know that's not a play, but schematically, you have to spend so much energy to get something out, and you don't get that much out of it typically.
Mm-hmm. No, that's right. And that's what we want to get across tonight. So I hope that's getting across. These topics are sometimes difficult if you didn't coach with me exactly. You understand every word. We're trying to get this done in 30, 40 minutes. The second thing I would say, other than more is not better, is evaluate your verbiage, which Chad kind of hit on. But let me tell you what I did with that, Chad. Let me tell you how I messed this up. So I feel like sometimes I tell these people stories as if I got it all figured out and learned everything. It's not true. So we used to run, you mentioned we run buck sweep. I mean, we were a wing T team. We moved into a wing T gun team probably before a lot of other teams did, and it really helped us at a time in the early 2000s. But we ran the wing T, like 421, buck sweep. So we would go, and we'd run 437 counter. That was the play. Well, then we started going no huddle. This is early now. This is when nobody was going to huddle. But we needed to be in the huddle too, because we wasn't going to be crazy. Stay in the no huddle. That was stupid. So we go no huddle occasionally. And we would call 437 counter club, counter left. So then I'm embarrassed to say how long we did this. I mean, this went on for like a decade. Okay, not like a day or two, for like a decade. There was 437 counter and club, or there was 12 power and Prince, and it was just the code word we used to run it when it was no hook. Well, we're at. I mean, I did this the whole time at Chapel Hill, I think. But anyway, At some point in time, the kids are coming to you and you're telling them 437 counter, and they're like, is that club? Is that the same as club? They're like, oh, I understand club. So we just dropped the 437 counter and just said club. Did it limit you some? Did kids not understand? Could we not run 427 counter? Could we not run 447 counter? Could we not do all the stuff that maybe gave those series-based plays a little more juice? Maybe. But the fact that everybody knew club was something. And they could play it fast. And they could go. And so from that point on, for the next 7 or 8 years after that, it was one word once. And if we could get away with it, one syllable. So we could get it in quick. It wasn't always one syllable. But if we could get away with it, it was because I wanted the verbiage. I put a lot of stock into the verbiage. Some people are going to listen to this and disagree with me, and that is totally okay. But I do not like when it's pro I write, zip, 27 X post, ZY. I don't like that. I'm over that. I did used to call some plays like that. I don't like it. I feel like the kids just memorize all that crap. And if you say back to me, well, yeah, but if you just call it club, what about the other play where you run? Then call it another thing. Call it clam when it's club with motion, or call it. The kids are memorizing this. Nobody's going to convince me otherwise on that. They're just memorizing. So if you're asking them to memorize 10 words or one's better. That's my big tip for the day. But Chad, you've been into, and we're talking offense in this one, so I'll ask you, but you've been in some different offensive schemes, including obviously mine. And you were part of the progression from calling some stuff more complicated to one syllable. So what do you say? I know you kind of already hit on this with O-linemen, but what do you say from the overall play call standpoint? Then I want to go back to the position group too.
Well, I mean, from the overall play standpoint, it was so much easier to interact. I mean, I can think about how much easier it made as the evolution of calling went from being no huddle to signaling when we were playing and stuff. And because we could make the signals, they were so simple because it was one word. I know that you could say, well, then one signal could be this for anything. It's not really true if you have to give them multiple different things on it. But because it was just bare, it was one signal. It didn't matter where everybody else was lined up, especially speaking to O-linemen. All they got was that one signal, and they only knew what they had to do. And it was very simple for me as the person signaling to the O-lineman. All I had to hear was the one word, and I knew exactly what to signal in to do. Mm-hmm. So my chances of screwing up the signal were very low on anything.
Let's talk about the verbiage beyond the play call, because obviously when I say evaluate the verbiage, people are going to go to the play call offensively mostly, but even on defense, and we're going to talk about defense in a second, Michael. But let's talk about just the individual stuff. So I'll give you another one. Wing T football, the tackle was gap down on backer. I can't even remember it anymore, but I think that's what it was. Them kids didn't know what any of that meant. They just memorized gap. They could tell you if you said, what's your rule? They'd say gap on, down, back, or something. But, they didn't know what that meant. We got a lot better when we told them block down. Down means inside. On or outside, reach, down, inside. You got to block down. So does down mean gap, down, back? Well, absolutely it does, because you block down your gap. If a backer comes, if nobody in gap, go to the backer, whatever. It's the same thing. We just called it down instead of gap, down, backer. I'm not saying you have to do that if you're in love with gap, down, backer, but at linebacker, we were going to tell the kids they had at two and away read. Their read was going at two and away. We didn't say these elaborate things they were doing, fastballs, curveball. I'm not knocking the folks that do that, but I just thought everything needed to be shorter. When it was shorter, it was better. Much like Chad's mentality in life. What do you got to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the only negative I would say to this is that the kids don't learn the concepts or why you do things. But like I say, you do get the positives, I feel like, outweigh the negatives in this. And yes, they don't understand necessarily what all the series and different things are. If you're talking about offense and wing tee, or, you know, the different formations and fronts and different things we're trying to do on defense. But the vast majority of kids didn't understand that anyway. You know, Chad talked about this earlier, like he was interested in those things. That's not true of most of the kids out there. So I think you have to kind of play to your strengths in this, and that you only get so much time. And so if you are somebody that's important to you, then that's fine. You're probably going to have to spend more time teaching the series and the play and all these different things. And so there's just less time for you to spend on something else. So just make sure that you understand that. We're not saying there's a right way or a wrong way, but like I said, there's only 24 hours in a day. There's only about 2 hours in a practice. If you're spending time trying to teach them what a series is, hopefully for you that pays off.
It needs to really pay off. Yeah.
Right.
And in saying that, but I will say that because coaching O-line's different most of the time, you got the guys the whole practice. I would take time to when we said bear, I did slow it down and show them what was happening behind them, so they knew what was going on.
Yeah.
Because it gave them a good reference of understanding it.
I would actually argue, of course, I got a biased opinion, seeing as how these are my tips and I made them up, but I think you can teach them the concepts this way. I actually would argue that, because it's almost like this, Michael, what came first, the chicken or the egg and all that. It's the same thing here. Will they learn the concepts in the order that you think they would learn them, or you learn them as a coach? No, they will not. You're correct. If we make something real short. But if kids get good at it, remember the outside linebacker that hit the guy in the mouth on the first play? He all of a sudden was a little more interested in defense when everybody cheered when he hit somebody in the mouth. He all of a sudden wanted to know what somebody else was doing. So sometimes we're waiting on them to learn the defense before they take off, like we would have. And you might be waiting a while because it might be too damn confusing for them. And maybe another time, if it's really simple, maybe they don't learn it at first. Maybe they're just memorizing what you ask them to do. But over a period of time, when you start another series, you want to run a different stunt, but you start it with the same letter, you can say, hey, man, this is just like that one. You just got it. And they kind of understand. So I actually thought sometimes our kids did understand football better, but they learned it in different order than maybe the guy reading a book learned it. You know what I mean? They didn't try to just learn a little bit every day and get better. They kind of had to be out there for a while before they really realized how cool this was for them. And when Chad had that moment that he brought up about making a great block, which really was a good story, that probably was better. If we did any prep work for this damn thing, we probably would have told that story instead of my linebacker story. But that was the day you started caring a little more about football, Chad. I wasn't there, but I can tell you because I saw it a bunch of times from kids. Like all of a sudden you were a little more interested. So maybe it wasn't that you always wanted to know what everybody was doing. Maybe it was, but maybe it was when you started realizing, damn, I'm not that bad. I kind of did a couple things okay. Now I want to know more about this game. I want to know what these other people. So yes, you're right to some degree on that, but I actually think getting kids better at the game is the best way to get better and make them want to understand concept. Just telling them, I'm the coach and you're going to learn this offense before you play. You better be somewhere like Jinx or Buford or somewhere. And you probably can, because there really are enough quality players that you might can hold them to a standard that you can do it a little differently than I did. I did not really have that luxury. If the kid was a decent athlete, we we're going to have to play. So we needed them to figure out a way to play. And if we had to get them to memorize the play and we had to make it one syllable, then that's what we had to do. And if we could teach them some ball along the way, that was better. So this is going to be an offensive one, number 3. But I guess it might work on defense, Michael. Tell me if I'm.
Yeah, I mean.
Consider running. So number 1 was more is not better necessarily. 2, at least evaluate your verb. We didn't say change it. Evaluate it. Is your verbiage, are you having 2 different things calling the same thing when it's unnecessary? 3, consider some plays one way. Let me tell you what I mean by that. And I kind of gave this away earlier. We were going to run our base plays right and left. Okay, no doubt. But if we had a complementary play, And for us, a complimentary play might have been if the nose was really whipping our ass on sweep or something, the center couldn't block the nose. Maybe we had a play where we read the nose. Like we ran the sweep, looked like just like sweep, but we're reading the nose. Quarterback's going to keep it like midline type play, right? How often are you going to call that play? You're going to call it once or twice max a game, and probably not even that. It's to get the nose to slow down. If it works one time and you gain 10 yards, it does its job. The nose slows down easily, you can reach it. So the nose is slanting to the strength, or he's slanting away from the back, or he's doing something that's he's doing, and it's giving him an advantage. Why do you need that play right and left? So we would take that play, like I would take that play and just run it, for example, right? And so we got double the reps. Every time we called it in practice, it was right. And you say, well, what if you're on another area of the field or whatever? Well, we get there pretty soon. Don't worry. We could run buck sweep every way, so it didn't really matter. We were going to better run that thing right from every part of the field, so that didn't matter. But then maybe we had another play where we read an inside backer that complemented the buck sweep, and it was a compliment play. It was just kind of something we threw in. Maybe we only ran that left. You know what I mean? And so we got double reps. So even though these plays didn't show up much in the game, we at least got double the reps in practice. So if you get to run 10 of them all week, we ran 10 right. No one was going to call. If you do it the other way, you got to run 5 right, 5 left. Maybe if you only ran 5 right and 5 left, 3 of them, the right tackle wasn't even in because he was getting water, just pure luck. The 2s were in, whatever. And the guy don't even know what the hell to do. If you run 10, that's very unlikely. Mm-hmm. So I said I like on, say, long yardage. I might be on one hash and run a lot of verticals. I might have been on the other hash and run a lot of sprint out. And you may, and maybe over the course of several years, somebody figured that out, but I don't remember ever feeling like the other team figured that out. But we get on the left hash, we're going to run sprint out. We get on the right hash, we're going to run verticals more or something. We could practice that. So we put the ball in the right hash at practice and threw a lot of verticals. Right-handed quarterback will throw vertical better left anyway. Just opening their hips. Same reason shortstops are right-handed. And a right-handed quarterback's going to sprint better from the left side. Sprinting right. Left hash, sprinting right, more grass. So we started there. And we were going to be so good at those plays that we could execute them. I just felt like but if you ran verticals on both hashes, now your shortstop's got to throw right-handed and left-handed, if that makes sense anyway. You've got to be in the position where your guy's got to flip his hips to throw that inside go to the field. And the other one, you got a position to throw it just like a shortstop. You got to practice both. If you're going to sprint right, you're going to sprint left. Nothing wrong with that. If you run a bunch of sprint out, I totally advocate for sprint right and left. But if you're only calling this thing once a game, it's kind of a mix-up thing to just get the edge and get a cheap first down. Why are you running this and practicing the hell out of it when you're only going to call it once in a game? You might as well just run it one way and get everybody exactly how they're going to be. Left hash, ball's here, this formation, whatever it is. So what do y'all got to add about that? We'll go on to the next
one. I think there is a thing from defense perspective. We did run blitzes one way and not the other.
Or field boundary or right or left?
From what we did, because we flipped. So it was strong and weak most of the time. And we would run some blitzes just from the strong side, some just from the weak side. And to God honest truth, it was basically year to year on who could blitz and who couldn't. Kids that were good at it, we blitzed them a lot more, and we worked those a lot more than we worked on the other. It's hard to blitz from the field in high school. Everybody 5-step drops, like you just can't get there. So we did a lot more stuff from the short side from like the big side. So we practice it the same way, like you say, work the stuff you want to do.
But you want to put them in that exact scenario. Mm-hmm. I'm going to add something to this. Get the damn ball out the middle of the field the whole practice. How many people's practice? I'm not going to call anybody out, but how many people's practice I go to, or you go to these 7-on-7 now, and they'll put the ball in the middle of the field the whole practice. Ball's very rarely in the middle of the field. It's not even 1/3 of the time. It's more like 1/5 of the time the ball's in the middle of the field. The ball is usually on the hash, and in high school, the hashes are wide, more so than college NFL. So, it's a big deal to be on the hash. If you're not using that, I think 99% of people listening to this are doing this, by the way. So I'm only talking to the 1% that aren't. But if you don't understand the hash and where the ball is, You got to do that before you listen. Go back to tip one, do that, and then start over. Because it's unbelievable to me how many people will do a whole 7-on-7 session in the middle of the field. I'm not talking about 7-on-7 practice. I'm talking about these folks. Michael knows that we go to like 7-on-7 camp, like you're throwing against another team, and you can put the ball wherever you want, and they just play the whole damn 10 minutes in the middle of the field. It's unbelievable to me. That's unbelievably stupid. It's great for you because you got the whole field, and your quarterback probably likes it because he can throw everywhere. It's fantastic. But that's not how the game is going to go. So use the field. Like Michael said, if you're better from the boundary, use the boundary. Put the kids on the boundary exactly where they're going to be. That is part of considering running things one way. It may just be you put people exactly where they are going to be. That helps them play faster. Remember the topic, play them faster. Play them fast. You got most people like we got turf now. If you got turf, no excuse for this. No excuse not to have them exactly on the field where they're going to be. What do you say, Chad?
No, I had one funny thought about that when you were talking about like running the trap play and stuff. And we talked about, having it both ways is problematic. I do remember in being in games where we might have had an injury, bang up, or we've had to shift somebody around. And we called that play, and somebody was on the opposite side than they usually are, and they did not know what to do because of that. So, it was just
ideally
just some errors that happened every once.
Ideally, their position coach would have planned for that and had them practice. But sometimes you get what you get as a head coach. Sometimes you just inherit some fools, and you got to take what they can do. But there's some. But you know what I would say back to that, Chad? If I had
was better the other way, by the way.
If I had this to do over again, I would do even more of it, is what I'm telling you. And I would tell you at the beginning of the year, all right, we're going to run trap right. We're going to get so many trap rights that we got to get every scenario in a little bit. You know what I mean? Like different fronts. I think that's something we could have done better, really, is just parked on different fronts, different subs, because we were getting double the reps.
Right.
We weren't having to run it both ways. Anyway. And let me make sure this was clear. I'm not talking about no base plays. Whatever your base play is, you better run both ways. Even if you got a base pass or two, base run, base plays you run off of that. Yeah. We're talking about other stuff. But I feel like the other stuff bogs down people's offense. Mm-hmm. Being able to, hey, I love mesh. We got to get mesh in. Well, we need mesh with a pyramid, mesh post, mesh with. Okay, great. Y cross, man. I love Y cross. But you know what? We really just run the ball. So we need trap, inside zone, duo, outside zone stretch, they just a power counter. Like they just start naming this stuff, and they're like, but we only got about 3 plays. Like, no, I think you got a few more than 3 plays, cuz. Right. So I think most teams are going to do all that's what I mean. We had more than 3 plays too. But if you're going to do that, consider running some of that stuff out of just one thing so you can kind of cut the reps down and still have it in, still make something defense has to work, but you're not married to it. The next thing I can't stress enough, this might be the one that I think is the most helpful, to be honest. If you don't have some unless rules, you're wrong. So the fourth thing is unless rules. You say, what is an unless rule? Old school option, we tell them give unless, right? Same way in the gun now. You're running the gun, you run zone read, power read, whatever. You tell the quarterback, give unless. Like, unless you're just 100% sure, give it. This is beautiful. The quarterbacks don't mess that up that often. If you harp on it enough, just give unless. Just give. The RPO, you see some people really better at this than others. Coaching the quarterbacks and RPOs, give unless. Throw it out there when it's open. It's a gift throw, they like to say. Throw it out there when it's open. Give unless. Okay. So I'm not even really talking about the quarterbacks. What about everything else? And what about everybody else? What about that cornerback? What's his unless rule? If he's not sure what he got, what's he need to do? I feel like that cornerback needs to know, look, bud, we're playing so-and-so, how we're playing, whatever. We cannot get beat deep. You need to make sure you're over the top. You're breaking up when you know this is happening. Or maybe other times you're like, hey, you got help, man. It's short unless. You're playing hard coverage unless. Or you're over the top unless. And I'm just using corner, it came to mind. I mean, you could put this on anything. You could say on pump coverage, we're doing this unless. Same way with the O lineman, Chad. We say, like, if you're not sure, do this. At least do this.
Right.
Now, you may say, man, you kind of limiting yourself. Look, I'm just trying to get these kids play faster, trying to win the game. They can play faster if they know at least if I do this, I got a chance. What you got, Chad?
Well, I think when we go to our base plays, this really applied to how not the play, but how we blocked the play from a standpoint. So we would, I always talked about we're going to work flat down the line. I'm thinking of down blocking on buck sweep. And we were going to run flat down the line to the whistle unless they started trying to read, unless they were spinning on the D line. And then we would change how we attacked them. And because we would figure that out pretty early in the game, what they were doing, we'd freak out the first series or two. If they got us on some stuff, we would just adjust then. So our rules for O-linemen were very much, we block this way all the time unless the opponent does this. And that's how we did it, which I know may be a little different than how you talk about with the quarterback, maybe even the cornerback. That's how it always applied in our world.
Well, and just can they play faster? Like you talked about, I think with the lineman, we talked about when it was a gap play, just run to the whistle, just run your feet to the whistle. If you're getting after, if you're blocking down and you're running your feet to the whistle and hitting something, we can live with that. Right. That's an unless rule too, because they don't have to use the word unless. It's just like, let's go. Just at least do this. Mm-hmm. We would love it if you were at the 400 level of O-line play, but at the 100 level, at least do this.
Right.
So maybe they should be unless rules or at least rules. At least let's do this. What would you say about that, Michael?
Yeah, I like it I like the at least better. I think that's a little bit more, especially like from a defensive side. It's so reactionary. It's going to change week to week, kind of what your unless rule. Like with Chad, when he was doing O-line, it literally could be the same every week. Like it's make contact, run your feet, all that. It's the same every week. In defense, it might be the corner this week might be, well, you got this really good guy. We got to keep him in front of you. We know they're going to try to throw deep. The next week, the team may not throw it all. So it's totally different. And I think it's just very important. It's almost like fundamental stuff. These are the things you have to be good at. We'll get better at the other stuff later, but these are the things you have to be able to do.
No, that's right. And that's exactly what we want to be. And I know it can change. Sometimes it may be something, an unless rule might be as simple as, look, we're not going to let these people run that toss. No. If you're going to stop toss, you react to the other stuff. Or you're going to stop whatever, react to the other stuff. So I just think if you're not talking like that, I was trying to think, and I really did put some thought in trying to make a list that was helpful for somebody. And like I said, there's 5 things on here, and I don't know that everybody would even agree or want to do all 5 of them. But I think there's something in here for everybody on ways they can get their kids to play a little faster. And so if you're not talking to your kids in those terms, you can probably get them playing a little faster if you did. That's all of them. So the last one, always, and anybody that follows on Twitter has seen this 1,000 times because I put it all the time out there, but always think a new formation, a new shift, a new motion over a new play. Plays make people play slower. And plays could even be blitzes on defense or calls on defense or different punt returns. So this sounds a little more offensive, but it could be on the other things. Think a new way to run that same thing and only abandon that and go to a brand new thing when you are really sure it's time for that. So we've talked a lot about the word buck sweep has come up a lot because that was where we started. But we were going to run buck sweep, but then we were going to run buck sweep with motion 2, motion away, shifting to it, trading the tight end, new formation, no tight end, 3 tight ends. You're going to get all that before we were going to just abandon and go to something. Or definitely before we created a new version of buck sweep. So we get some problem the week before where linebackers are scraping over the top and getting us, and that was a problem on buck sweep. We didn't come up with a new buck sweep where one guy didn't pull or a new buck sweep where somebody did a jumping jack or some dumb stuff that people do. We really just said, well, can we run motion away from them and make those backers hold for a second? Now, everybody else blocked buck sweep, but when we call this version of buck sweep, motions away, we're going to hold these backers. They usually worked. It really did. Safety's rolling down, making a tackle. Do we need a new play? Probably not. You probably need a new formation where that safety got to cover on the RPO. Maybe just putting twins away from the tight end takes a safety out there. He can't. You see what I'm saying? It's not as simple as people watch this safety make the tackle and think, oh, that's when we call the buck jumping jack play. No, it's really not. It's when you just get in a new formation and don't let that kid stand there anymore. Because there's trips and he has to go be responsible for trips, or there's whatever it is, right? Always think a new formation, a new shift, a new motion, a new something before you think a new play. And if all those things aren't working, so we've run the motion away, we've run the new formation, we're still struggling, we probably suck at this play, it's time to go to a new one. But so I'm not advocating that you don't ever go to a new one. Sometimes you do. But always think a new formation, a new shift, a new motion. What you got, Chad?
No, that was from an O-line standpoint, when you coach the kids that are the least athletic on the field, anything that the play caller can do to help you block people is always way more beneficial than them having to learn a new play that might then incorporate new blocking schemes and thereby new blocking techniques that have to be learned. So running that damn motion slows those backers down is way more helpful than having to create a whole new play to deal with that.
The buck jumping jack.
Correct.
I like that one. I'm coining that. I swear somebody looks like some of these people trying to do something like that. I don't know. I'll get off of that soapbox. You got anything to add to this, Michael?
I think this is, I feel like we hit on this earlier when we were talking about like more is not necessarily better. Like these are the way, this is kind of a sub bullet. I would feel that this is what you can do to, instead of adding a new play, just change the formation. Or on defense, same thing, like just line up a little bit differently, but do the same thing. Still work on your base stuff. So you're not really doing anything different. You don't spend time on it, but it does look a little bit different to the other team. It looks different to the offense. You lined up in a different spot. You're in a 3 instead of a 2 or whatever, or like say you're in twins this time and trips next, but you're running the same play. So it's just, you're going to get the defense different positions or an offense different positions. And it's an easy thing for you to do that's going to change up what the other team's going to see.
Exactly right. Those would be my 5 ways to play faster. I know we always trying to be a little faster, Chad. I tell you, my favorite thing in the stands is when they tell them to run faster. Some people's like block somebody. I like block somebody too now. It's up there. But I like run faster better. You don't even hear run faster as much. You probably hear more get them and block somebody. But when you get the occasional run faster, I always think, I hope that somebody's running fast as he can. Like, I didn't know we had to tell them to run faster. Like, that's unbelievable to me. But we're always trying to get a little faster, Chad. Not faster maybe on the 40 in this episode, but faster mentally. So that should be a good one. Time for the music, Michael.